Hi, this is Paula Gloria, and this show is called Farther Down the Rabbit Hole because we like to go into topics more deeply. We're coming to you today from what I call Rabbit Hole Central, my little apartment here in Gramercy Park, New York. And we have the great privilege of having with us, joining us on Skype, Alfred Adask. Is that correct, Alfred?
No, I say it Adask. I'm not the only one who does, but I say it's... I pronounce it Adask, but I hear Adask and Adask, and I hear a bunch of things.
That's wonderful. So Joe and I are going to be asking you some questions about the religious argument that you've run into. Do you want to explain that?
Well, in 2001, a guy by the name of Bill Fornell and his wife and their corporation, they'd been manufacturing colloidal silver. Colloidal silver is an inexpensive antibiotic that consists of distilled water and silver ions. Okay? They'd been manufacturing it, and they'd come to the attention of the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. And the FDA, they'd been manufacturing down here on Texas. The Food and Drug Administration sent an email to the Texas Department of State Health Services and the Attorney General of the state of Texas, and they said, you ought to investigate these guys. Well, based on that email, the Texas Department of State Health Services and the Attorney General of the state of Texas began an investigation of Bill Fornell and his wife and their corporation, and charged them, threatened them with, they charged them under manufacturing and distribution of a controlled substance. All right, this is the same law that applies if they'd been making methamphetamine or if they'd been dealing in cocaine or heroin or marijuana. They charged them under that law, and they threatened them with fines of $25,000 per day per defendant. All right? That's $9 million a year. Well, of course, they panicked, and they went out and they hired one of the better law firms in Texas, and ultimately paid the law firm $160,000 to defend them against this lawsuit. And all that happened is the lawsuit, it just, the cost, the attorney fees bankrupted Mr. and Mrs. Fornell, and the stress of the bankruptcy pushed them into a divorce, and they divorced and split. They left Texas for parts unknown. Well, before they left, they sold some of their assets to a man named Ben Taylor, who also lives in Texas. And they didn't sell the business to Ben Taylor, but they did sell some of their equipment and some of their supplies. And what happened is they sold some of the business, some of the supplies, and the Attorney General of the state of Texas added them to added Ben and his corporation and his trust to the lawsuit, named them as defendants. A friend of Ben's, I do radio programs, and a friend of Ben Taylor told him, give Al a call, because Al Adask might be able to help you out on this thing. Called me up, asked if I could help, and I said, yeah, I'll see if I could get involved. And I volunteered to be fiduciary for his trust, which is one of the defendants in the case.
Can you explain what fiduciary means to those viewers who might not know?
Well, a fiduciary is the guy who's in charge of administering a trust on behalf of the beneficiaries. This was a trust that had about $2,000 worth of tables and chairs and just some miscellaneous office equipment in it, and the trust was leasing the tables, the chairs, and the other office equipment to the corporation that was manufacturing the colloidal silver, and then money was going off to the beneficiary of the trust, who was Ben's brother. All right, and I volunteered to be fiduciary for the trust because it would give me standing to speak in court. Okay? And as soon as I volunteered to be fiduciary for the trust, the Attorney General of the state of Texas added me as a defendant. All right? Now I became a defendant. Now I am personally liable for $25,000 per day. Fines, $9 million a year.
Very
this is pretty sobering. Understand? I guarantee you, I can't come up with $25,000 a year to pay the fines, let alone $25,000 a day. This is a sobering situation. You get sued by the Attorney General for $9 million a year. I guarantee it focuses your attention.
Right.
Well, I start reading the relevant laws. I read the relevant laws, and it turns out I read the drug laws and the definition of drugs as found in Texas law. And I found a phrase in the Texas law as a phrase in the Texas law that defines the meaning of drugs. And this is the controlled substance. This is what applies because we're charged under controlled substance laws. And I read the relevant law, and it included the phrase man or other animals. Now what that means is they didn't say man or animals. They said man or other animals. The phrase means that they deem man to be an animal. And the first time I saw it, I thought, why, the damn fools, they don't even understand how to write. They didn't realize what they were writing when they put it in the law. They said, they're saying the people are animals. Now, I understand, I've understood for years that the government kind of treats us like animals, but I never expected to actually find it in the law. And here it was. And I thought it was just stupidity. I thought it was just a mistake. And then I looked at the same definition of drugs up at the federal level. Same thing. They also said man or other animals, and I knew right then this is not an accident. This is exactly how they're operating. They presume the people to be animals. I am a student of the Bible. I'm not a scholar, but I read it. I understand a little bit about the Bible. And therefore, when they declare me to be animals, I know it contradicts what I regard as the second most important principle in the Bible. First principle you find in Genesis 1:1. And it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And what that means from a legal perspective is by virtue of having created the heavens and the earth, God is the owner. It's the same principle that you find in patent law and copyright law right now. If you create something, you own whatever it was you created. God created the heavens and the earth. He owns it. He can do whatever he wants with it. All right? That's the first principle. And it's the most important principle in the Bible. And it's the first sentence at Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The next, from my perspective, important principle is on Genesis 1:26 through 28.
Oh, excuse me, before you go on, you're saying owner and creator are the same thing.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if you create, you absolutely own.
I see.
Now, once you've created, if you care to sell, you can sell to others. And then they would own. But if you create something new, it's yours. You have, and again, this is reflected in our copyright law and our patent law, this principle, and it goes all the way back to Genesis 1:1. It's fundamental. The Creator owns His creation. He can sell it, and then somebody else would own it, but the Creator automatically owns.
Okay, I don't mean to distract you on where you're going, but I just want to clarify points. What about the case of a farmer? If he puts a seed in the ground, does he own what grows, or does God own that?
Well, I don't doubt that God puts the seed down there. The regular seed is a blessing, and you can use those seed to go. We're going to argue initially that the farmer owns it. But what happens if he's using genetically modified seed that's been created not by God, but by, DuPont or one of the big Archer Daniel Midland?
So you mean to say that a patent would kind of cut God out of the deal?
Well, that would be the theory. That is one theory on this. If they create that seed, that corn, for example, that they're growing, it becomes evidence that. Here, let me move this up a little bit for what it's worth. It becomes evidence that Archer Daniel Midland, if they created the seed, they're going to make a claim on that corn. They're going to say that's our corn. And don't you be planting any of those seeds again. Now, those seeds aren't supposed to grow a second time. But they're claiming to own the seed. And essentially, it's a very complex, and I can't give you an answer on this. I can only say that there's way more to genetically modified food than just a question of whether or not weeds will grow around it. All right, or whether you can use insecticide on it. There are legal implications to genetically modified food that are complex, dangerous, but that's something for another time.
Okay, so we are back to creator and owner.
Pardon me?
We're back to the creator owning what he's created.
Well, the creator automatically owns whatever he creates. All right, the creation is the property of the creator always. He can sell it to someone else, but he is the initial owner. He does have true ownership of the property, whatever it was he's created. Genesis, first principle in the Bible, Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. By virtue of that act of creation, he owns the whole shebang. He can do with it as he pleases. It's his. You can't argue about it. He can do whatever he wants with it. First principle. Second principle, Genesis 1:26 through 28. On the sixth day, God created man in his image and gave man dominion over the animals. That means that man is not an animal. Under the Jewish, Christian, and probably Muslim faiths, you can't presume man to be an animal without violating our freedom of religion. My faith tells me that on the sixth day I was created, my forebears, my ancestors, you, me, and the rest of that, we have descended from a being that was made in God's image and a being that was expressly distinguished from the animals by virtue of God's law. God says you're not an animal. God says you're made in God's image. And this is no small thing. This is powerful, powerful, and important principle. Most people don't grasp it, but it is a powerful concept. I understood it because, again, I've been a student of the Bible. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I read it and I try to understand it as best I can. And it's not something recent. I've been at it for a while. And as soon as I saw the drug laws, the definition of controlled substances and drugs, and also the definition of medical devices include the phrase man or other animals. As soon as I found it, I knew these guys are violating our freedom of religion. You cannot declare me to be an animal without violating what I regard as the second most important principle in the Bible, that we're made in God's image and we're given dominion over the animals. When you declare me to be an animal, you are violating my religious freedom. And that's exactly what the government has done with these damn drug laws and medical device laws. They've declared us all to be animals. We use the phrase man or other animals, or they also sometimes use the phrase animals other than man. Same thing. They are treating the people as animals. Absolute violation of my freedom of religion. It's also a violation of the Declaration of Independence. Declaration of Independence started this country, and it's still part of the organic law of the United States of America. That's not a personal opinion. I've got revised statutes of 1875, where the Congress declared the organic law of the United States of America includes the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the Northwest Territorial Ordinance, and finally the Constitution of the United States. Those 4 documents comprise the organic law of the United States of America. It means that the Declaration of Independence to this day is as much the law as the Constitution. It's not just an interesting historical document. It's part of the law if you know how to get at it and you can cite it properly. The Declaration of Independence starts, the second sentence in the Declaration says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Second sentence in the Declaration of Independence. That sentence declares all men, again, to be equal and to be endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. And it's a long story, and I won't try to get into it here. But it's the foundation for claiming our status as individual sovereigns. That's what this nation was intended to be, a nation of individual sovereigns. This was unprecedented in Western history. All right? Formerly, the only sovereign was the king of England, for example, or the king of Spain or the king of France. The reason he was sovereign was because he got his rights directly from God. He had the divine right of kings. All else were subjects because they did not get their rights directly from God. Whatever rights they had flowed through the king. The king was the one who was endowed by his creator with certain unalienable rights, and that's what made him sovereign. When our country started out, they said, no, wait a second, we don't believe that just one man gets his rights directly from God. We believe all men get their rights directly from God, and they get an equal dose. And with that statement, they elevated all of us to the status of sovereigns. And as sovereigns, government was no longer our master. Government was our servant. This is where we had the idea that a man's home was his castle. We had the idea that government was to be our public servant. It flowed from the idea that you were a sovereign and I was a sovereign. That all of the living people in this country were individually sovereigns. It was borne out in the case of Chisholm versus Georgia, year of our Lord 1793, where the Supreme Court declared this nation to be comprised, the people to be sovereigns without subjects. No subjects, but all sovereigns. That was the impression. The third sentence of the Declaration of Independence says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The first half of that sentence is what I want to focus on. It says that to secure these rights, which rights? The God-given, unalienable rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and there's others, but those are the ones that were mentioned. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. They're telling us that the purpose of government as envisioned by the founders was to secure to every man, woman, and even unborn child their God-given unalienable rights. Those rights attach as an attribute of creation, not birth, for example. All right? Under the 14th Amendment, you don't get your civil rights until you're born. 14th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Your don't attach until you are born. Your unalienable rights attach at the moment of your creation, which is no later than your conception. This is a powerful argument relative to abortion issue, for example. But getting back to the drug issue, how this relates to the drug issue. When the government declares us to be animals, the government no longer has an obligation to secure our God-given unalienable rights. If you are prepared to be an animal on this global plantation, if you're prepared to accept that status, then they're going to handle you just like so much livestock, like poultry in a chicken processing plant.
And that's what's happening.
That's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. This is powerful stuff. This is a powerful insight. And I want to make one other point. When I first started to read this, this is the sort of thing, again, I believe in, I don't just believe in the God of the Bible. I know for a fact He exists. All right? It isn't just a question of faith. It's a question of knowledge for me. This is important stuff, and the reason I got to this is because the good Lord sometimes lets me see. I don't see everything, I don't see perfectly, but sometimes He lets me see. So far as I know, I'm the first one to read the drug laws and realize what they mean. They've had people that are being charged drug dealing. All right? They get some drug dealers. I'm not here to advocate drugs. I don't do any. You understand? I've spent $15 on drugs in my entire life, and that was back in 1965. All right? And at the time it was, LSD, and it was legal at that time. I've never paid for any what people regard as illegal drugs. I don't do them. I drink water. I don't even drink coffee or tea or beer or other sort of thing. I'm not here to advocate drug use, but I am absolutely not going to tolerate a government that declares me to be nothing but livestock. I will not accept that. All right? If the government can't find a way, if they're so sure they want to deal with drugs, they're going to have to do it in a way that deals with me and other people as living men and women, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. And if they can't do that, then leave the issue alone. It's none of their damn business. When they declare us to be animals, they are absolved from the purpose of government envisioned by the founders, seen in the third sentence of the Declaration, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. The rights of men and women made in God's image. Those are the ones that they don't have any rights to animals that they have to secure. Again, they can treat you again just like livestock on the damn, in the global plantation and the Tyson poultry processing plant. They'd clip your little beak off and do whatever they want to do with you. Hang you up and, turn you into hamburger or chicken thighs, and so on. That's the implication. And it's not just rhetoric. All of this information is available on my blog. All right? And I've got, the blog is at Adask, ADASK, .wordpress.com. And you go on the blog, and over on the right-hand side, there's a list of categories. And these are subjects that I've talked about on the blog. The very top category is man or other animals. If you click on that, it'll take you to a list of 8 different, I think it's 8, about 8, different documents I've written that deal with this concept of man or other animals. The first one, the earliest one, is down at the bottom of the list, and it's text that we submitted to the Attorney General's office when we first began to understand this concept. You can learn, you can verify this for yourself. You can see it. And the third one, the third of the documents, is the one that deals with genocide. The law of genocide is that anyone who creates circumstances or a particular group, a race, an ethnic division, an age group, any kind of particular group, I don't care how you want to phrase it, they create circumstances that merely increase the probability that that group will die. You don't have to kill anybody to commit genocide. All you have to do is increase the probability that that group might die. If they do that, it constitutes an act of genocide. You can go to a website called genocidewatch.org. I believe it's .org. It might be .com, but it's genocidewatch, and I think it's .org. If you fish around on that website, it's not mine, it's somebody else's, you'll find a document entitled The 8 Stages of Genocide. And it lists 8 stages, of each one of which is a different manifestation of genocide, and the last one is where you actually kill people. All right? Or maybe the last one is where you try to conceal the genocide, and the 7th one is killing people. But the third step out of these 8 is dehumanization. That's the general term for it. And they specifically say, if you call another man or group, a race or whatever, you degrade them and say they're just animals, they're just insects, they're just vermin. That constitutes an act of genocide, because once you reduce people to the status of animals, insects, vermin, then you can exterminate them like a nest of rats or a hive of wasps out on the back porch. You don't have to you can go after the non-combatants, you can go after the women, you can go after the children. You can kill them all because they're not men or women. This is a fundamental principle. The first time when you see these battles break out in Africa between the Hutus and the Tutsis, and they decide they're going to go after each other with machetes, the first thing they do is they say the Hutus are a bunch of animals. And as soon as everybody accepts the idea that the Hutus are a bunch of animals, then you can go kill them all. It's something that's not just endemic to the United States of America. It's something that's recognized around the world. When you reduce a man to the status of an animal, you have increased the probability that he may die. As such, when you apply that facts, you apply the facts of the relevant drug laws, the definition of drugs, the definition of medical devices, you apply them to, and again, in the case we were dealing with, we found, my recollection, I believe it was 23 separate instances where the drug laws and regulations referred to the people as animals. All right, about half of those were in Texas law, about half in federal law. We've found them in 5 other states where we've looked.
Could you cite some of the federal ones so we can look them up?
They're in that document that I mentioned that's at my blog. Again, at Adask, ADASK.wordpress.com. Look under the categories section for man or other animals. Go all the way down to the bottom of the list, and there's a document there that we submitted to into the courts in our system that'll list these documents, that'll list these definitions and sites and so on. I can't pull them right out off the top of my head just by memory right this minute. I don't remember exactly what I was saying. The point was, well, here is maybe the point, just to move this on a little bit. We advanced this argument, and once I saw this, and again, I think I'm the first one to see it and understand what it meant. And they've had, again, I was talking about, you've got people that are dealing drugs, and they're paying attorneys hundreds of thousands of dollars for their defense. You understand? And the attorneys are getting them off with 5 years, and they think they're doing a great job. We didn't have any attorneys. We did this, no attorneys. You understand? We read the law. I actually read the law and understand it. And you've got powerful, highly educated attorneys that are reading the law, and they don't get it. They're letting their clients go to jail because they're too damn dumb to understand the law. We looked at this, I looked at it, and I thought, my God, this is incredible, and it's fantastic. And we drafted a religious freedom defense, primarily. We used a couple other lines of defense, but this is the one that rocked their boat. And up until that time, we'd been receiving paperwork, certified mail, from the Attorney General of the state of Texas. We were getting it every 2 to 6 weeks. And it's unnerving. Postman comes to the door, and he says, I got certified mail for you. And you know it's coming from the Attorney General, and he's trying to get you for $25,000 a day. You understand? And you keep receiving this mail, and it's the sort of thing where you say, oh my God. You know, you don't much like it, but you got it. When we advanced the religious freedom defense for the first time and explained, look, you can't treat me as an animal. It's a violation of my freedom of religion. And when we advanced that, the first thing that happened, the Attorney General's office went dead silent for 5 months. We'd been getting paperwork from him every 2 to 6 weeks. Ben had been doing it for 2 years, and at that point I'd been in for a year and a half or thereabouts. I don't remember exactly, 15 months. Every 2 to 6 weeks, get it. Now we get nothing for 5 months. Then the Attorney General's office comes back, we have a hearing, and the Chief Administrative Judge for Travis County. Travis County is the seat of government for Texas. That's where the state capital is located. And the Chief Administrative Judge, that's a big job. That's an important position down there. It's not just for the beginners don't come in and get to be Chief Administrative Judge. Chief Administrative Judge John K. Dietz takes over the case. And the first thing he does is he tries to intimidate us a little bit. He brings, we have a hearing, after we're into the hearing about 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, he instructs the court reporter to ask for security. Have security come in here. And I thought, oh man, I'm going to jail, you know. These guys are going to throw me in jail. I'm going to spend another who knows how long. They brought security in. Security stood around for a while, and we didn't flinch and the rest of that sort of thing. And finally, the judge says, you guys can go now. And after a little while, they said, I'm going to do something I've virtually never done before. I'm going to invite you guys back into chambers and see if we can work out a private settlement on this case. And we said, sure, you know. We didn't know exactly what was going on, but we said, sure, we're willing to do that. We went back into Judge Dietz's chambers. He talked to us, and then he talked to the Assistant Attorney General, Raul Noriega, who was in charge of this particular case. And he was working back and forth, talking to us back and forth, and we spent ultimately 5 months in negotiations. I don't mean that we were there the 5 months. We had a meeting that day. We agreed to meet again in 6 weeks, agreed to meet again after that. The whole thing dragged on for 5 months before they finally just said, you guys aren't going to settle. We know that. They got down to where they offered us, where the only thing we had to do to settle this case was if Ben Taylor would take a food manufacturer's license. That's all he had to do. Just take the license. There would be no fines. They wipe out all the fines. $25,000 a day, gone. 100% gone. Plus, they wouldn't charge us with court costs. And the Assistant Attorney General, Raul Noriega, he told us at one point, he said he'd been there 22 years. He was driving a Mercedes-Benz that was provided to him by the state of Texas. You understand? That's a pretty good job. All right? He's been Assistant Attorney General 22 years, driving a Mercedes-Benz, and he told us in his time he had never heard of a case where the Attorney General was prepared to not only not charge the fines, but not even charge court costs. And the court costs would have run $500,000 in this case. We know that they told us at one point how much money they'd spent, and we understand. We extrapolated a little bit, but they figured they spent the best part of $500,000 on this case. They didn't even want the $500,000. They would let us go if Ben would just take a food manufacturer's license. Well, we wouldn't take the license. Huh? And after that, we had 2 more hearings. They said they were jurisdictional hearings. They claimed they had jurisdiction in the case. And after that, we haven't heard a word from them now since, I think it was November 2007. They just dropped the case. We wouldn't settle, and they couldn't proceed. They'd invested 6 years and $500,000 in this case, and they simply dropped it because we advanced a religious freedom defense. Now, I think that's unprecedented. I don't know of anyone else that's done anything like that. And it is not proof that this argument works. We never got to a court where they said, yeah, you're right. But it's pretty good evidence. When the Attorney General of the state of Texas says, hey, we're dropping the case, forget it, we're going no further. The reason they dropped the case is because the political implications are explosive. The war on drugs initiated by President Nixon back in 1971 is based on a definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals. If this argument goes to court, how are you going to get a jury to admit that they and their children and their parents and everybody they've ever loved or liked, including the defendant, are nothing but animals? I don't see how you're going to get this past the jury. But assuming you did, and assuming the state could win in court, and they found a jury said, yeah, we don't mind being called animals, and find this guy guilty, and we're going to sentence him to 25 years or something like that. Fine, you go up on appeal. You are going to have to reach an appellate court judge, especially if you have any political support. If you gather up some demonstrators that are going to start to surround the courthouse and start demonstrating, and they get their signs and the rest of that sort of thing, we are not animals. Violation of Genesis 1:26 through 28. Violation of the Christian faith. Violation of the Jewish faith. Violation of the Muslim faith. I'm not a student of Muslim, but I'll bet you the Muslims are operating under the same principle. They don't believe themselves to be animals. They believe themselves to be made in God's image. I'll bet that's true, but I don't know it to be so. But even if it's not, you get the Christians out there and say, wait a second, this government can't treat us like animals. How far can they run this up the appellate ladder before some appellate court is going to say, look, we can't treat the people like animals. They are men and women. How far can they go if you advance the genocide argument and show you sons of bitches are committing genocide against the people of the United States of America? And it's not rhetoric. You look at the law, you look at the facts, you put the two of them together, you say, by God, the federal government is committing genocide against the American people. And it's not just crazy talk. It's what it is. That's what's happening. They can't touch this issue, in my opinion. Now, you got to be able to present it. All right, this isn't something for some dummy to just walk in the door. You're going to have to be able to articulate the ideas. You're going to have to understand the idea and understand the concept in order to make this work for you. But it's not rocket science. It takes some study, it takes some understanding, but it's not rocket science. Nixon started the war on drugs based on the presumption that the people are nothing but animals. That war on drugs has persisted and laid the foundation for much of the modern police state. If it weren't for the war on drugs, we wouldn't have, most people are like, oh, the damn police state. There wouldn't be a police state that was worth mentioning right now if they couldn't go after people for drugs. I'll make you a bet, I don't know what percentage of the police activity is devoted to controlling drugs one way or another, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's 50%, and I bet it's at least a third of their activity is drug-related. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 50%. That means you take the drug laws down, and all of a sudden you have taken a bite out of the police department where they don't need half of their employees, or they're going to have to put them to work actually catching people who've committed crimes like murder, robbery, and rape. Huh? The police state laid the foundation for the prison industrial complex. We jail a higher percentage of people in this country than any other nation on the face of the earth. By that measure, we are the world's biggest police state. And I've seen studies that indicate that 70% of the people that are in federal penitentiaries, they're there for drug-related crimes. The prison industrial complex is built on the police state, which is built on the war on drugs, which is built on a little definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals. This whole monstrous edifice of police state and prison industrial complex, this whole thing is perched like a pyramid on a tip. Instead of laying on its base and going up to the small tip, it's on that little tiny tip of a definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals, and it's an absolute violation of their freedom of religion. And there's no way to argue around it that I'm able to even imagine.
Who's responsible for that language?
Language goes back to the earliest reference we find is the 1906 Food, Drugs, and Cosmetics Act. We think it started in 1906. That was the first time they used the man or other animals phrase that we've been able to find. It might go back a little bit beyond that. It wasn't significant. It was just food, drug, and cosmetics at the time. All right? I don't think it was all that significant and potent in 1906, but here we are a century later, and it's big. I mean, it's big. If you can bring this in front of a jury, and they said, no, you can't treat us like animals. You take down the prison industrial complex. You take down the police state. You take down the war on drugs. I mean, this is powerful, powerful stuff, and I believe that's why when we advanced this argument and we refused to reach a settlement with these people, even though it got down to where, again, all they had to do is take a license. If you'd taken a license, the whole thing would have been forgotten. But they would have admitted, they could have avoided this thing. We wouldn't take the license. They dropped the case. They can't take the political implications, in my opinion, are too great for them to deal with.
So you've got two important issues here. One, a right for one is a right for all. And the other is you can't convert a right into a privilege and charge for it. Do you relate to either of those two statements?
I understand what you're saying in broad strokes. My position, you have your arguments that the principles you've just pointed out are more legal. All right, and I don't have any objection to that. I don't think it's bad or anything wrong, anything like that. But I'm hanging on a spiritual foundation. I'm going on a religious and also a political perspective on this case. Religion, you can't treat me like an animal. Genesis 1:26 through 28 makes it absolutely clear that a Christian can't be an animal, a Jew can't be an animal, and more than likely a Muslim can't be an animal.
Why did you not take the license? What if the license said, we recognize you're a human being?
If you take the license, you agree. Once you take the license, you've admitted that you're subject to their authority.
I got you.
Here's what it comes down to. As near as we can see, the system operates on the presumption that you have consented to be treated as an animal.
I see.
I can't tell you that's God's truth, but I think that's how they operate. They operate on that presumption. If you take the license is for the animals. They're licensing the animals. You're right back in the same boat. You defeat your own argument if you take the license. We sat back and said, no, we are men, made in God's image, endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Now, and you can't impose these laws on us. They are unconstitutional. They violate our First Amendment freedom of religion, and it's Article 1, Section 10, or Section 6 in the Texas Constitution. You're violating my freedom of religion. You can't make your drug law stand against my freedom of religion. It must be modified to eliminate the presumption that the people are animals. Now, it may be that once we defeat these drug laws, they might be able to go back and modify the law, and they might be able to apply it to men and women. But I don't think so. Maybe they can. Maybe we're not going to treat you as animals anymore, but we still own you. We can still do what we want to you. I don't think so. I think this creates too big a problem. If they could do it, they wouldn't have created the presumption that we are animals in the first place. If you can reestablish that you are a man, that you are a woman, not a person, not an inhabitant, not a citizen, none of that, You got to be the man, you got to be the woman. You have to appear as one of the people of the state of New York. Not one of the persons, not one of the public, one of the people. Got to be one of the man, got to be the woman. If you can establish that, you can make them blink. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't give you, say it's God's truth. I can just tell you what happened in our case. And again, from my perspective, they invested $6.5 million. And they just dropped it. Pretty good evidence that it's not proof, but it's pretty good evidence that this is a powerful and valid, concept and line of defense. So if you've got questions, I guess I can continue, but I've pretty much made my pitch.
The only question that I have is, do you know anything about the New York law on that?
No, I can't, but it wouldn't even be hard to find. I mean, you start looking into whatever the New York law is, there will be definitions for controlled substances. All right, you can take a look. Again, if you'll take a look at the paperwork that I have on the blog, you download it, they're available, anybody who wants to look at it can look at it. It'll spell out where we found it and what we looked for under Texas law.
Give your blog again so people can get it.
It's Adask, A-D-A-S-K. That's my last name. ADASK.wordpress.com. Okay, you run then there, it'll take you down. And again, just look for under the categories section. On the right-hand side, you'll see man or other animals as the first category. Click on it. It'll take you to a list of 8 documents. Click on any one of the 8 documents you read, and you'll be able to download it, take a look at it, and start at the bottom and work your way to the top. The bottom is the older documents. They are the original insight. And the one at the bottom in particular, it is least, I haven't looked at it in a long time, but it's at least primarily document that was submitted to the court in our case. And it spells this out as well as I could at the time. Here we are now. That was drafted, something like 2006, if I recall correctly. Today I could probably do a better job, but it's there. Everything you need is there, and you can parallel it in New York.
I agree. It's a stunning insight. I'm just wondering, could there be a justification, say, for man and other animals that they wanted to be more scientific and just look on us as biological entities, but then... Absolutely. They can make that argument. Under the theory of evolution, this makes absolute sense. Under the theory of evolution, if you are evolved from a lower form of life, then you're an animal. All right? If you were evolved from monkeys or from lemurs or on down rodents or something in the ocean, fine, then you're an animal. But the problem they've got is if you're a man made in God's image, all right, and that's exactly what my Bible declares me to be, and I don't see how they can get around that. Yes, you've got to walk away from the theory of evolution if you're going to accept this concept. But if you go back to the Bible and say, wait, I am a man made in God's image and in Declaration of Independence and endowed by my Creator with certain unalienable rights. Well, what do they get to say? How do they get past that? I understand, Al, but, for the sake of those who do not accept the Bible as authority, but do accept the Constitution as the supreme law of the land, could we say that this is a question of authority and jurisdiction? Like, even if it was scientific that you're saying, you're talking about biological entities, whether it's a man or an animal, who then would have the right to make the decisions about what that human being or animal puts into his body? Who
owns it? Who owns the livestock? I don't know. Who has the right to tell the cow, determine what the cow eats out in the farmer's pasture? The government, to some extent, will determine what kind of shots you can give the livestock. It'll determine medical care for the livestock. There's a bunch of things that they can do to animals that they can't do to men and women. And it goes to a fundamental question. Do you want to be free or do you want to be a subject?
Sometimes they're doing worse things to people than to animals. You would put a loved pet, out of its misery if it's on its last legs, whereas human beings can be kept on, machines indefinitely, and it seems very torturous. But
well, they don't keep them any longer than the money in the insurance policy.
Well, a lot
Generally
of people,
speaking, they pull the plug about the same time that the insurance policy stops coughing out money. They say, this one is too far gone to say, pull the plug.
I understand your cynicism, and I agree. A lot of people are overinsured, and therein lies their health problems. I
understand.
That's true. But getting back to this argument, has anybody else used it in court as successfully?
Not that I'm aware of.
As you
Not
have?
that I'm aware of it. In fact, I've been trying to advance this argument, and I've been trying to publicize it and so on since 2006. So here we are, 5 years practically since we first started with this thing, and we haven't made much headway. We've had people jump on it, and they think it's an exciting idea, and then nothing comes of it.
I would like to advance this because I've been saying for 40 years, just leave that. I've been saying for 40 years that smoking marijuana is a part of my religion.
No, I understand.
And in my studies, I've seen that for religious use, it goes back 5,000 years. In recorded history. Now, we don't know beyond the recorded history how many years it goes, right? And it started all the way back when the Hebrews left Egypt. They went to, what was the name?
Well,
I can't remember, but anywhere where the Zoroastrians were, right? Persia, that's it. They went into Persia when the Hebrews left Israel. They left Egypt. They went into Persia, and in Persia, they were using marijuana, or it was hemp then, cannabis hemp, as for religion, and the Hebrews picked it up, and they used it for medicine and for religion. They called it cannabisum. If you look up cannabisum, and all the ancient prophets and kings of Israel were anointed with an oil that they called the sacred anointing oil of the Hebrews, which was made from marijuana and made from olive oil and frankincense and myrrh and cinnamon bark, and they boiled it all together. And then all the kings and prophets of Israel were anointed with it. And Christ was called the Anointed. And he was anointed with, very few Christians know this, that Christ was anointed with cannabis oil at birth. And the wise men, the 3 wise men, brought frankincense and myrrh, which were 2 of the ingredients in making the sacred anointing oil. And the 3 wise men who came were Zoroastrian priests.
Well, I understand. I mean, there's, again, you have to make up your mind how you want to craft this argument, if you even care to use it. But
I want to use it.
I mean, all I can tell you is, again, we didn't get a victory in court. The court didn't say, yeah, you're right, we didn't get that. They just dropped the case. They wouldn't even take us to court. Now, that strikes me as, that's pretty interesting evidence. It's not proof, but it's pretty interesting evidence. And the reason it works, again, is because it is so politically explosive. If it were only a question of whether or not you're a man or an animal, or whether or not they can or cannot regulate you, I don't know, on one level, the world doesn't care. But when you put this up and you make the jury understand that the government deems all of you jurors to be nothing but animals, they deem your children to be nothing but animals, and in doing so, particularly if you back it up with reference to the law on genocide, that shows that by virtue of deeming you and your children and your spouse and so on to be animals, they have technically committed an act of genocide against you. Now, who are you going to vote for? Where are you going to find 12 jurors that say, well, I don't mind being subject to genocide, not if it's by our own government. I mean, it would be terrible if it was genocide by the Germans against the Jews or the communists against the people of Soviet. That would be terrible. But when our government commits genocide, that's good genocide. You're never going to find 12 jurors who'll go for that. And even if you do, then you go up on appeal, and then what? Somebody's got to admit that we, the people, are not animals. They've got to admit that. And if they won't admit it, then they're inviting a shooting revolution. I mean, you're not going to call me an animal and get away with it. You understand? I feel just like one of the Hutus down there. When I hear the Tutsis are declaring me to be an animal, guess what? You're coming with your machete, well, I got mine. All right?
You know, I've heard some of your arguments advanced by Marshall Rosenberg. He teaches nonviolent communication.
I don't know the name.
He also said that one of the first steps to doing violence to somebody is first to dehumanize them.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Then you can justify any of your behavior as that they're less deserving than you are.
Absolutely.
The whole idea of a nation of sovereigns is a fascinating concept, and more interesting in our study of the law, how to advance Joe's case to keep him out of slavery, because that's essentially what's happening is you're converting the population into slaves, you know, through the drug laws, and also I see through driver's licenses, speeding tickets, you know, anything to make people naughty. And
anything to move you out of the status of being a man or a woman made in God's image and endowed by your Creator with certain unalienable rights. If they can get you to appear in any status other than that, they own you. They can handle you any way they want. But if you show up as a man, you got another problem. They got a problem. Now, you know, it's easier said than done. Even when we did this, it was 2 years we were involved in this thing. I was involved in it for 2 years. It took a year, took 9 months, 9 months before I figured out what the law was. And there's a lot of stress. And even when they disappear, you don't hear from them and you wonder what's up. It takes you another year to wonder if this thing is over or not. You go through, there's a price to be paid. This isn't an easy situation.
What about a civil suit for all the stress this has caused you?
Well, that's another story. I mean, I think my own perspective is that anytime you go into court as a defendant, you're a fool. All right? If you're going to be, somebody wants to sue me, I'm going to counterclaim. I'm going to counterclaim every single time. Now, we didn't do that then. All right? Didn't know to do it. I didn't have enough brains to do it at the time. But right now, if you want to sue me for anything you like, I guarantee I'm going to counterclaim. I will not appear in court simply as a defendant. Defendants lose probably 95% of the time. Certainly in criminal cases. They lose about 98% of the time in criminal cases. In civil cases, it's not that high, but predominantly defendants lose. And even if a defendant theoretically wins, he doesn't really win. All that happens, if you're a defendant, you're brought into court, and the jury of the court rules in your favor, now what? You have just wasted 2 years of your life, maybe a whole bunch of money, a great deal of anxiety, where you've been sweating this thing out for 2 years, 6 months, however long this case has been dragging on. You paid all of that price, and maybe they say not guilty. Well, big deal. You still lost a lot by appearing as a defendant.
Did you hear
the only people who can win are those who show up as plaintiffs. That's why, in my opinion, you counterclaim. I don't care if it's a traffic ticket. Sue them. Counterclaim. Put them in jeopardy.
Did you hear Constitution Man talking about the $1.8 million a day that somebody got as a settlement for being wrongly incarcerated?
I don't know who you mean by Constitution Man, but you're probably talking about a case that comes out of Florida. And in fact, that's a misnomer, all right? Without knowing what the man said, I don't know what the man said, so I can't say for a fact. But he's probably talking about, there's a case in California where a woman was falsely imprisoned. Florida, that's right, Florida. She was falsely imprisoned for a matter of like 10, 15 minutes. And she received something like a $25,000 compensation for 15 minutes.
Right.
And what people are doing is they're extrapolating and say, well, if you can get $25,000 for 15 minutes, then you can get $100,000 an hour, and you can get however many millions of dollars this thing calculates out to if you multiply it out through the course of the day. The way I understand the law is the courts will go along with $25,000 a day for false imprisonment. That's what the courts will generally go along with. Now, sometimes people get more, but it's $25,000 for the first 9 minutes. It's $25,000 for the first 24 hours. You don't multiply 25,000 times every 9 or 10 minutes and keep on adding it up. You get 25 per day.
You know, I think Constitution Man's point is that our inalienable rights are priceless. I think that's
Oh, absolutely.
his point. And that when you're talking about all the aggravation that you went through, what you did, even though you don't think you got a win and it just sort of fizzled away, you did something for all of us.
Oh, I appreciate we got a win. We just don't have a trophy. I won the race, in my opinion. I mean, good Lord, he helps. He lets me see we won the race. We just didn't get a blue ribbon or a trophy. There was nobody back there, but we were the only ones to cross the finish line. So we got a victory, but we just can't prove it. I don't have a medal that I can show you and say, ha-ha, I took first place. No.
I think the medal will be in better health. I mean, one thing, people can question whether the Bible's so or whether Jesus was an historical figure or not, but what I get from the Bible is that Jesus did the healings. And now that we're seeing the cancer cure coming on board and people's experience with it, Dr. Mishalim at the University of Jerusalem discovered THC, the active ingredient, in 1969. Since then, he's also been studying frankincense and myrrh and finding that they're highly anti-tumoral.
Mm-hmm.
So we are definitely talking about simple ingredients that if we simply have access to, we can have a better society.
I agree with you 100%. And one of the things about this...
we only have a minute and a half, so you can take us out on any finishing comments.
Well, this is a politically explosive argument. If we're correct in what we've done here, it's evidence that the federal government has been committing genocide against the American people since 1906. And incidentally, the genocide laws are such that only the government can charge genocide. What a coincidence, huh? They're perpetrating genocide. I can't charge genocide. I can show you the evidence, but I can't charge it because I'm not the government. Nevertheless, the political implications are explosive. If this can be handled properly by someone who knows what they're doing, is prepared to stand up in court and make these arguments, this is a big and important concept. I want to thank you, Paula and Joe. Thank you for inviting me down here. And
thank you.
Thank you very much. And I really hope that my husband, Joe Barton, can absorb your insight in such a way that we all advance and we have better health and access to a less painful life.
And hopefully we can take your case the next step and get a win.
Good. Well, that's what I'm hoping. That's what I want to see. I wasn't able to do it myself, but I hope somebody's going to do it.
Any time that you're in New York, I'd love to invite you in the studios and we can take calls from a live audience in Manhattan. I think that would be...
Well, I don't do much traveling anymore, tell you the truth. My circumstances are such that it's not economical for me to be traveling, and I'm at a point in life where I'm content. If I get more than 50 or 100 feet away from my internet connection, I start to go into anxiety, withdrawal fits and the rest of that sort of thing. So I got to stay pretty close to my internet connection. So.
Well, maybe we can hook it up that way. We'll look into the technology. But you've given a lot of food for thought, and a lot of the viewers. I've got about 3,000 subscribers on YouTube, and some of them are very sophisticated people from all kinds of different backgrounds. And so I know this is going to stimulate some interest.
I know this is going to happen. It just isn't going to happen. I thought it was going to happen right away. It's going to happen. It's going to take more time than I thought.
Right. So go to youtube.com/Paula Gloria and you'll see more about my work. And and I hope to work with you in the future.
Okay. Look forward to hearing from you again, and let me know what happens, Joe.
Yeah, okay.
With whatever you're doing in your case, I'd certainly like to know.
Thank you. Yep, and I will.
Great.
Okay, good. All right, thank you, folks.
Great.
Have a good day.
Over and out. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.